Many people jumping on the late conversation from yesterday of the school that had a gas leak and a building collapse, leaving one person dead and one person missing at the last time we checked in on this story. Also, many people all day with the conversation on Donald Trump and his new plan that was put forth by two senators on changing up how immigration and green cards goes. And a very odd conversation happening last night late as we talked about Sofia Vergara, who's deciding to do something pretty ballsy for a 45-year-old that my wife wasn't too thrilled that I was all that interested in. We'll talk about that and more great stories we chat about all day yesterday in the Daily Recap podcast for today. Today happens to be August 3rd, 2017. And welcome to the podcast. My name is Jay Payne. I'm your host for this podcast. This is the Conversations Daily Recap podcast where every single day or 5 days a week, recap the stories, the big ones that we chatted about on the past days. For the Monday edition, we actually do the past weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And then on Saturday, we gather together for what's called the Weekly Wrap-Up Podcast. That podcast will have the top 10 stories for the full 7 days, plus some other thans, and usually an interview where we get a chance to figure out which story of the top 10 is most important to our guest speaker for the day. Today, being a Thursday, we're just in the pattern of wrapping things up, getting towards the end of the week, and just doing our own natural thing. Now, how can you be a part of all the conversations we do all day long? It is very simple. You just literally join in the conversation by looking at what we're talking about via social media and our website. On social media, you can find us at @TH_conversation for Twitter. Find us on Facebook at This Is The Conversation. And find us online for our main website at thisistheconversation.com, where you can just react, interact, retweet, refriend, relike, resend, do whatever you want to with the actual stories as they come down. Just interact with the stories as you see them in your feed. And the more interaction we see from y'alls out there, the more we know it's a big story to talk about. And we have some really big stories to talk about that happened all day yesterday. We start off with Donald Trump doing a couple things in the news. Number one, he's setting off a task force to deal with affirmative action in college admissions, which should sound like a great thing. But what it essentially does is deal with affirmative actions as the fact that affirmative action lets in people of minorities and distress of different groups into bigger schools, essentially reversing the point of affirmative action. This is, of course, a commission that's saying that too many people who do not deserve to get in based on whatever are not getting in. So they're trying to fix that, as opposed to affirmative action's thought process of trying to make sure that a nice number of random, diverse, different people are getting into a situation, as opposed to keeping them out because of various things to keep them out. This is something that Donald Trump essentially has a big thing for. And what it turns into is the legacies of an institution essentially have first dibs and first say at what's going on, which is essentially has always been the case for institutions like that. But what it does is it turns the legacies into an extra body to eliminate people they don't want into the system. It lets fewer newer people into the system, fewer new blood, if you will, into the university systems and the higher university systems. It allows for discrimination, in a sense, on people for various things that are not connected to them having a legacy connection to the school. So if you're a legacy, you still probably have great connections to whatever great school you want to get to. If you're not a legacy, it may be harder to get into something that's not a normal or a state school that supposedly allows everyone in. And speaking of allowing everyone in, Donald Trump was joined by a couple senators yesterday to talk about a new spin on immigration. Now, we know we've talked about the big thing about illegal immigration. Those are the people that are coming across the border from Mexico and the United States border. They come from all over the place, but they cross that specific border, and that's why Donald Trump is looking to build a big wall to keep people out. A more metaphysical wall, a mental wall, if you will, comes from the green card program, a program that many people in the Silicon Valley and just worker people have said is an issue about immigration because they need more workers who have the abilities that apparently Americans do not. The goal is to trim down the number of green cards that are allowed for people outside the United States and limit those to people who have more legacies. These are people who are actually essentially first cousin-ish connections family-wise to people who are citizens. So if you are a citizen and you have a brother, a sister, a mother, a father, a direct line of lineage to you, and they're looking to get citizenship, they'll probably get preferential treatment at some point. They're looking for people who are of a higher income, people who can pay their way in, if you will, and can come here and not be a burden on the system, pay for their own health care, have enough knowledge and have enough skills and have enough background, have enough degrees that are documented to get a real good job, as opposed to coming here and taking whatever's on the low end. What this is supposed to do is raise the wages for jobs here in the United States so that more Americans will take those jobs, as opposed to allowing people from overseas to take lower wage jobs to take them from Americans. If you squeeze out the supply, the demand for the jobs should become something of a differential, and the demand will allow and enforce a rule that means the job should pay more for people here in America. The biggest problem with these jobs and that whole thought process is the people coming from overseas. While there are a lot of people in the tech world coming and taking the tech jobs or coming here and taking tech spots in universities and taking that knowledge away or sending their money away, a lot of the people coming here for jobs, filling these spots, are people taking low-wage jobs that Americans don't necessarily want or cannot sustain a family. You see a lot of people coming here and being builders, low-level builders, construction people, dealing with things in small-level type jobs and taking whatever they can to be in America and to graze things up for their second or maybe third generations, and not necessarily coming over here just to play the lotto of the United States, if you will. So this is something that's getting some flack. We'll see if the actual measure actually goes through. Right now, it's just a thought process from a couple senators. We'll see if the senators and, of course, the House and the other side will allow this to actually come to fruition. We got news yesterday of the retirement of Prince Philip, who is the husband of Queen Elizabeth. He's the prince because the queen is the actual born into the family, so he doesn't get to be king like many other folks don't get to be king. But Prince Philip has been doing the job for 65 years. The queen's been on the throne for quite some time, and Prince Philip has been by her side for the big chunk of that. Prince Philip, now in not so great health, is going to step down from his official post of the Duke of whatever it is, and he's officially his official job is essentially to lord over a branch of the military, a special branch of the military. He's going to be in one more major parade to have his sort of sayonara from his job part, and then he's going to do limited roles. He's still the prince. He's still married to the queen, and so he still has that title, but he's going to do less of the work stuff, less of the public appearances, because his health has not been so great in the late part of these times. So we're looking out for Prince Philip, hoping he's still kicking it for quite some time, but the man can use a little rest, deciding to finally give it up after 65 years of doing the job of being a royal, although he's not quite giving up the royal part. NASA is looking to hire a new person. So this is not quite a job that Donald Trump can take claim for, but they're looking for something called a planetary protection officer. Now, many jokes around the web essentially looked in this job with this title and some of the details of kind of scanning space as essentially a superhero to go through and protect us from aliens. You are essentially the Men in Black, or starting the Men in Black. This is not exactly the case. What they're looking for is a person who's essentially going over data, looking over bits and pieces of information to see that our nation and the world, in a sense, are safe from spatial things, interplanetary things, and that what's happening out there isn't affecting what's going on here, and vice versa. Things here don't affect space, although you would think not many things on the planet affects the outer areas. You would be surprised, which is why they need a planetary protection officer to make sure that the planetary stuff is protected, and vice versa. If you're looking to fill that job, you need a little extra cash, or thinks this may be the perfect dream job for you, check out NASA. They are hiring for this bit right here. The biggest story of the day was a later story of the day, and a lot of people were interested in the updates on this. A school in Minnesota had a natural gas explosion and a partial building collapse from that. From that, about 10 people were hurt in the actual incident, and police and fire were dealing with an incident trying to keep the building cordoned off and stabilized. One person died in the issue, and they were looking for, at last check of the story, one missing member. A administrative person was killed in the blast, and they were looking for a missing member of the building's support team. The building's essentially, let's say, janitorial staff, for lack of a better word. One of the people that worked in the support of the building for the school was still missing at last check. We'll get more details on this down the line. This one is obviously going to be our number one hit story of the week. It's going to be hard to catch this one up with the many responses given out to this one, and it was about literally 1,000 times more than the highest one of the day, which we'll get to in just a moment. A tech company, and this is going to sound a lot like a plug, but this is something that was interesting. A tech company called Booster, which is a new app essentially for Silicon Valley tech companies, other companies, that allows the company Booster to drive to your office and fill up your employees' gas tanks while they're at work. It saves them the hassle of going to a gas station and filling up their gas tank. So it sounds like a very good, awesome perk. But is it something that's really going to work and take off? This is not something that's really working for just random people, like you'll have a mobile detail guy that shows up at your place of work while you're inside and washes your car, and then you may get a couple other guys to do it as well. This is something that a lot of companies are looking forward to, and they're really big companies who can spend the money to get this set up, because it's kind of expensive having a tanker truck drive to your parking lot to fill up people's cars. Now, we'll see if this takes off as a big perk for the new Silicon Valley guys, and whether it can become something that's a bit more of a national thing to your random big corporation. Right now, it's one of those things that companies that spend a lot of money on their people that seem frivolous to us, but brings people into working, such as doing dry cleaning in the office and things like that, catered lunches, the things that these places are famous for. Seems to work for them, or seems to work for them in theory. Whether Booster becomes a big-time booster for apps or just flutters in the wind, we shall see. And what was not quite the biggest story of the day, it was a late story that I found. I guess it was on all day, and now it's becoming something that's in the trades and the papers all day for today, actually. But a story released late yesterday, and of course, like I said, chatted about all day today, I'm sure, about Sofia Vergara, who, of course, star of many things right now, including Modern Family, is doing something pretty awesome for her age, if you will. At 45 years old, the very nice-looking Latina lady is posing nude for the cover of Women's Health magazine, which, of course, is going to bring us subscriptions up for that magazine, especially probably with some dirty old men type. But that was the conversation that ended up being an awkward conversation with my wife, who's a big fan of the show, who said, well, that's great and all, but, she's already kind of pretty. What point is it that she's on the cover naked? Why don't they have someone who has a more normal body type? And at that point, I knew to end that conversation at that point there and then. But this is something you should check out. What she's showing, that being Vergara, and she's not showing so much. She's obviously, strategically covered in the cover and on the inside of the magazine. But showing that at her age, at the age of 45, it's not a bad thing to be ashamed, or it's not a bad thing to be ashamed. How am I saying this right? You should not be ashamed of your body. You should not be ashamed of your age, and not be ashamed of doing your best to look good and feel good in your body. Now, this, as my wife said, is kind of, pretty redundant when you have a pretty nice body like she does, which is often part of the jokes inside of the show. But it does have a greater meaning. It does have a greater meaning for the people who actually read Women's Health and people who are looking for a bit of inspiration to try to get into better shape or feel better in general physically. It's okay as you get older to notice that things aren't exactly as they were as you grew younger, and to do things to fix it. And the route that you want to take, or the severity you want to take, it's kind of up to you. But it's okay to want to be a bit vain and look really good at an advanced age. Not that 45 is an advanced age, but to some, things start to fall apart around that age there. So that's something to look forward to. Or not, if you're not quite at that part. And those were some of the stories that we chatted about all day on the Wednesday that was yesterday. And great things happening on today, I'm sure. Lots of great conversations going on in the world. And we will see how well they play out when we check out another podcast tomorrow. But to be a part of the presentation, to be in the show, if you will, all you have to do is be a part of the show. Check out the stories as they come through on your feeds and interact with them. The more you interact with them, when you click on the links, when you share them with friends, when you retweet, reply, you let us know what you think about them. Give your response, whether it is cheeky or whether it is charged. That adds into the score, and we, of course, will tell you how things roll out towards the end of the day inside the podcast. So to be in it, just do like that. Follow us along, see what you want to see, and we will tell you what you wanted to see all day long. In the meantime, check out more of the great things I have going on. I like to think they're great. Check out my main website at jclevelandpayne.net for other great projects that are going on. I say great because that's kind of stuck in my head, but I think they're pretty good. And, of course, be here tomorrow. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you're here tomorrow, and share it with a friend, share it with some enemies, and share it with a couple random strangers if you have time, so that they can get a part of the conversations and more greater, better, gooder conversations with other great people. Of course, be here tomorrow. More podcasts, more conversations. This is theconversation.com.